now unlocked and unleashed. As we can see, well, all-round education has had an impact on the students. So we'd like to find out that in the second year of the JCACB, so you'd like to learn more about this, and therefore we'd be moving on to the first panel discussion, and the theme is Collaboration Student-Centered Creative Classrooms. So we have Mr. Simon Wong, who is a director, and he's also an education knowledge, and he has 30 years of experience, and he has been developing a lot of interesting artwork. And since the 80s, he has also been working with the Hong Kong repertoire and also other arts groups. And he was also once creative lecturer in the Baptist U in terms of creativity or creative arts. So over to you, Mr. Wong. Now let's invite the creative practitioners and teachers. They are from the Tin Shui Wai School, and also Ms. Yoki Lai, a creative practitioner responsible for costume design and production. And from the Ma On Shan St. Joseph Primary School, we have Ms. So. And then from the another St. Lasse school, we have Ms. Hong, and then we also have creative practitioner Kenny Poon, and also Ms. Lau, who is responsible for visual art, and also and also two other representatives. Over to you. Well, we are very pleased today because both yesterday and today we've been listening to a lot of interesting things. And when I chatted with my fellow colleagues yesterday, well, some people describe the situation in Hong Kong as, well, we're using the curriculum or the textbooks from the 19th century, and then we ask the teachers from the 20th century to teach students in the 21st century. I don't admit that is the case, but then indeed we are having people from the 20th century encountering the situation in the 21st century. But then I think we are already better off than people in London, because they have the 19th century subway or tube facing the 21st century transport situation. Well, in our case, we are talking about a 19th century prison, and you're also trying to, we are also having a group of teachers from the 20th century who are trying to liberate themselves, and now we are having students from the 21st century who would not be prepared to listen to us. And now we are looking into how we can encounter or how we can face the students in the 21st century. And I think we are having students who are smarter and smarter. Okay, if I would be permitted to chair one of the panels in the next or in the following years, then I'd be inviting more students to join us. But then to make us look more like students, I'd like to invite you to play this game with me. In fact, it's a very simple game. Just now we've been talking about collaboration, but then very rarely do we genuinely collaborate. So the first thing that we do is to approach a stranger that we met first time today, and then we'll play paper, scissors, stone with this stranger. Okay? You win. It doesn't mean that you're going to speak first, but then you will have to listen to me first. And then the winner will have to listen to the other guy for a minute. And then the one who loses will also have to listen to that guy for another minute. So I'll be giving you 6 minutes. And then between the two of you, you will work it out as to what you can collaborate. So we've been talking about collaboration. We've been asking our children to collaborate in schools, but then apparently we ourselves have not been able to collaborate, and therefore we will have to we would have to demonstrate to them as to how we can collaborate. Okay, I'll be interviewing some of you, and if I find out that you have not been working with anybody else, then it would be your opportunity to host your first ever concert here in Tai Kwun. Okay, I'll be using the timer. I'll be timing you. Okay, let's get started.
好，1分鐘。
1 minute, interview begins. You done? Right. The boot is on the other foot. You have to listen back to your partner. Last 10 seconds. Time's up. 6 seconds. Please decide what you're going to do. 6 seconds starts now. All right, thank you very much. Please be seated. Yes, please take a seat. We're going to have more programs for next year. CPs and teachers, please come back. Did you learn a lot? Right. After warming up, let's back to the topic. I mean, are we behaving like 21st century students? I mean, it feels more like a school now. All right, then we can become the 21st century students now. Collaboration, we're talking a lot about the students. And our creative project, we talk about collaboration and cooperation. It is not sufficiently creative, so we have to talk about collaboration in the second stage. Before I invite the teachers, in order to make sure that they're not so lonely, they have come with a lot of people. Let's introduce the schools. Please wave your hand when we introduce a school. Tin Shui Wai Methodist Primary School, all principals and teachers and CPs, wave your hands. Where are you? Over there. Oh. Right, yeah, over there. If you move to Tin Shui Wai, get in touch with them. Monshan, St. Joseph Primary School, really expensive posh area. Monshan, it is getting expensive. St. Rose of Lima School, big team there. Yanai Tong, Tin Ka Bing Primary School. Do you remember that? There are so many Tin Ka Bing primary schools in Hong Kong. And the Buddhist Ching Kok Lin Association School over there. Right? We have to be fair. They lost the stone, paper, and scissors, and they have to come down. I have to include them. And during the break, I think you have to talk to them. You don't have to be so humble. All right, 3 stages. The first one is collaboration. What has it got to do with creation, and what has it got to do with critical thinking, and also why is it important to the development of a creative industry, and also the career prospect. Right? Teacher home, collaboration. What does it do to the critical thinking and the interaction of students? Let me take a primary 5 project, for example. They are doing some creative work in the open space in school. They are using the ribbons. They are making this contraption using the ribbons, and in a collaborative process, before they actually put the ribbons together, they may have a lot of ideas in mind. But when it comes to the situation on the ground, they discovered so many problems. So in collaboration, this is about problem spotting and problem solving. And they have to unleash their creative potential. There are some contraptions that involve 2 buildings or 2 stories, and they have to throw the ribbon from the top floor to the bottom floor, and the students on the lower floor would be chasing the ribbon around, and it's not sufficiently effective. So they've got some ideas, like, for example, they're using the plastic bags, or they're using a ballpoint pen to tie a ballpoint pen to the ribbon and lower the ribbon like that, instead of having the ribbon floating around. Right, so these 21st century students are smarter than us, and they can solve all these problems in the 20th century. So the question is, plastic bag. Teacher Lau, what happened to your school? I go along with my colleague. When the students are collaborating, they can come up with ways to resolve problems. In my school, we did have a lot of collaborative ways or cooperative ways. Last year, we put a lot of emphasis on cooperation first, because the students didn't get together so much. Previously, we would complete a task together. Yesterday, I heard the sharing of my colleagues. I thought about an analogy. Like when we do the collaborative work, like a relay race, for example, everyone wants to win, and everyone is racing to the finishing line, and they have their own respective roles, and they don't really have to have any no interaction at all. But this year, it seems that there is more in the way of collaboration. We gave some spaghetti or candy floss to them, and they get the materials, and they break up the strands of spaghetti, and they have to stack the stuff up, and they think that they've got the best way, and they're using their own way to do it. Now, with the spaghetti strands being broken up, how can they stack them up? And they had communication, and they were trying to come up with some ways to stack up the spaghetti strands, and they had a lot of communication and interaction. And that wasn't a one-off exercise. We had this task twice. in the process, the students didn't do that well enough in some cases, but they accept their shortcomings and they were prepared to listen to others' views and had some discussion generated. So for the second time, we didn't give the materials to them direct. We asked them to have a bit of a discussion. We demonstrated what to do with the materials, and we let them feel, let them observe, let them try. And after their discussion, then they rolled up their sleeves and got on with the task. And when they did it the second time, they did it on the basis of their observation, and they came up with their own ways. So for the second attempt, they stacked up the spaghetti strands higher, faster, and they could complete the task in unison. They worked together very much. So in the process, the children learned the ability to resolve problems. They learn about themselves first. They know about their shortcomings, and they're prepared to listen to others' views. So collaboration works wonders. Right, through collaboration, they can expand the scope of knowledge, and they can resolve the problems. It would be far better than them working on the problems on their own. All right, let's turn to this side. I'm Shan. Teacher So, what happened in your school? Hi, I'm Teacher So. In my school, our project is of a similar nature. The kids form themselves into groups and to resolve the problems. Now, we would divide the students up into groups to have some competition, to some win, some lose. But when this time we divided them into groups, and through collaboration, things turned out differently. The context was different. The theme was in the primordial time, in ancient times, we had to invent or to make an ancient tool, and the children went about doing this. We took them to the tree house. We told them that in absence of any technology, how did people survive? They had some props, they had some tools, the hammer and things that you saw. And these tools were used for hunting animals. But in fact, in that context, we gave them a scenario, and they started putting on their thinking cap. And it's not a question of hunting animals. They have to start the fire, to cook the food, and we form them into groups. Like we do have this ethnic grouping concept. We're not dividing them up into small groups for competition. We're asking them to form specific groups that have some common features, some commonality, and we allow the ethnic group to grow and how they make the contribution, and they had a broader horizon. And in the small groups, they were trying to complement one another in order to finish the task. So the children were far more involved than ever before, right, in the primordial world. Right, the children don't have to be worried about going back to the old ancient times. All right, let's move on to Teacher Lee from Tin Shui Wai Methodist Primary School. And Ms. Lee can understand Cantonese. If we speak Putonghua, it would be far harder for her to understand. Now, the first point is when there are some questions for the students in our small group collaboration. Obviously, for Chinese and other subjects, we do have a small group teaching.
Within a group, you'd find the most brilliant one who would not be asking others for their opinions, and then he'd think that he's the smartest, and therefore he'd like to show it off to the teacher, and therefore he cannot be bothered to ask the others in the group. But then once we did the AFTEC, well, even if somebody thought that he's the smartest, he would still have to ask his fellow teammates for opinions. That's point number one. And secondly is appreciation. So amongst the teammates and also the appreciation or commendation from teachers or praises from teachers would be somewhat different. Because among the peers, if you manage to get some very gentle or moderate praise, then you will still feel very good. Because if you do well, then of course the teacher would praise you. But then if you're able to get other fellow students' compliments, they are also well-performing students, then you would also feel very good. So I think we can see those changes amongst the students. Yes, even for the underperforming students under the leadership of the stronger or the better performing students, they would also be able to do better. Thank you for your sharing. Okay, later on we are going to talk more about collaboration and also personal progression and improvement. Next is Teacher Ng. Why have we come to you that late? Because for the 4 other schools, they've been joining for the 2nd year, and you have been joining for the 1st year. So I was trying to make sure that you can get familiarized after they have spoken. So we always have new entrants, or else how can we have older ones? Okay, Teacher Ng. Well, I'd like to share with you the collaboration in our school. In fact, after listening to you, okay, helping them to get motivated and get involved, well, our school is somewhat different because the interception point is a warming up exercise before the class. Because in our case, well, every time before a class, there'll be a warming up session, and then the situation or the activities involved will be somewhat different, and the way we do it would also have to do with the class that follows. So initially we had 60 students, and then a dozen or so would be joining online via Zoom because they are cross-boundary students. So initially, they did not know how to interact with one another, and their interpersonal skills were very limited because of the pandemic. They did not have a lot of opportunity to interact with others, and therefore they would be very self-centered, and therefore they would build this wall in front of them. But then in the pre-class activity, it's not a personal game. They would have to play with others. Either they would be in groups of 12 or so. So every time there will be differences. And therefore, in the course of the activity, they would have to break through the wall that they have built around themselves. And then they would have to interact with others. And then they will start to collaborate. So we are towards the end of the year now. And now they get to know how they can make use of their own strengths, and then they can share it with others. And then their different strengths can also be combined, and then they would work together to create something new. And that's something that has been a very nice surprise to us. So within a year, they've made tremendous progress. Yes, indeed. So school principals have not taken part in this. So you can see that in a year's time, you can see remarkable difference. So once again, let's give them a warm of applause to the 5 schools. In fact, they have had a hard time because they have done so much. But then the result has been better than expected. Is quite amazing. Okay, this year's situation is somewhat different, because you are like AFTEC members, so you're within the same big family. Okay, so even your children would call themselves AFTEC children, but then don't show it off. Okay, next, Ms. Chen. So how many schools have you been to help out? Just one. Well, you can go to more. Yes, I'll try. Okay. So what's your take on the students collaborating after a year? Well, in fact, the curriculum design is in such a way that initially we didn't expect too much to happen. Okay, there would be pre-class activity, and then there would be a thematic activity. So we would try to bring out the theme, and then would been to one child and others for observation, and then they try to set up a store, and then they run the store, and then they will have to write an article to accompany that. That is to write up an article. So initially, as the teacher just said, they were very much self-centered. And there were, within a group, there would also be students with better performance, others with more moderate performance. And apparently, some of them did not have self-esteem, and therefore they would choose to compromise. But then in the course of the curriculum, in the course of the program, we can see the change because they would be more willing to work with others. And in some, in some cases, they would rather work alone. And then later, they would be prepared to work with others. In some cases, they'd be working in groups of 4 or even 6. So we would allow them to collaborate, and yet at the same time, we would allow them to have their own voices. So throughout the process, they'd be able to build up their own self-esteem, and yet at the same time, they can also share their discoveries with others, and they can also learn how to collaborate. So collaboration would change a student. So instead of passively working with others, they would take the initiative to collaborate, and they could also create new things on their own, and yet they can also project themselves as a member of the group, and then they can work with others. So collaboration would also help the creativity, help develop creativity, and also the ability to work with others. So it's not 2 + 2 = 4. It can be bigger, so you can expand their knowledge bases. Yes, within the framework, once they are given the right to choose, they would be more willing to share. So indeed, so once you have the choice, you are truly your own boss. Okay, next, Ms. Lai. I think you're more experienced, right? Yes, this is the 2nd year. So what I'd like to share is, in fact, the same as what Kiwi just said. Initially, students would be very much to themselves, and they would just be very self-centered. But then we try to prepare themselves for this, and therefore this year we started to find out ways to deal with arguments within the group. So we would also have to do the collaboration ourselves. We would also have to do it progressively during the first term. There will be role-playing exercises so that they can imagine or put themselves in the shoes of someone else. And then there would be collaboration. And given the fact that there would always be stronger students and those who would be less well-equipped. So that's what happened in the first term. And then starting from the 2nd term, they gradually grasp the idea of what we expected them to do in terms of collaboration. So we would just give them some supportive aid, but then we would just give them the direction as to how they are expected to collaborate. So we do a lot of rehearsals, a lot of practices. So there would be a dummy doll, and then they would design together, and then we would have a group of students to do this facial mask, and then costume design. And then we would then give them the story, and then we would divide them into 2 teams of boys group and then a girls group. So for the girls team, they would be working on the costume for Dorothy. And then we can see that a lot of improvement has been made. And then we've also done our best to ensure that they would understand this. So to give you an example, we would do some demonstrations, because they would have to have certain skills in doing that, and that we would also add in that element of collaboration. So it's not just the CP or the teacher doing the demonstration. Students would also have to be involved. And then it just dawned on the students that we will have to work together to do this demonstration. And then we would tell them how to do the tailoring, and then the second one would follow the example, and then the third one would do the same. So it's not just the teacher who would have the ability or the skill. And then subsequently they found out that, well, if others have not tried it out, they should have this chance to do the same. And therefore, when they are given the chance to come up with their own product, we can see that the spirit has already spread. That is, they would have this sense of equity, and they feel that it's only right that everybody should have a share, and they would have to respect one another. My apologies for being so talkative. Okay, in the process, there would also be a lot of discussion. And why is it the case? Because there was a group of the group of girls are talking about Dorothy, the heroine in the Wizard of Oz. So they would discuss what fabric should be used, why we have chosen this fabric. So the process was very heated. But then only after the discussion would we understand why they would have this thought, because they have put in a lot of efforts in finding out this, and then they try to come up with a consensus, and they try to describe what they have in mind. So from the first term at the beginning, when they only had their own thoughts, they would try to be they would be very laid back. But then obviously, starting from the second term, they would be more proactive, and they would be prepared to work together to achieve or accomplish something. We can see the change, the gradual change, and that's most amazing. So from the very self-centered students, well, they are willing to try to lobby and convince the others, and then they would be prepared to make compromises, and then they would deepen the collaboration and then come up with a joint product. So instead of just expressing themselves as an individual, they would be prepared to work with others and come up with a group product. Yes, well, I've been collaborating with many of the schools here, and then I've been observing them right from the beginning. And well, just a couple of days ago, I was still doing the observation. I can see that the schools have been very helpful, because at the start of the term, well, we only did it in a classroom, in a conventional classroom, and then students would also have their own desk, and that would be suitable for the situation then, because when we listen to the teachers and the students, well, at that time, some of the students would be very laid back. They were worried that they might be making mistakes, and they were worried that teachers might criticize them. And then when they were divided into groups, they would try to see who would come out the first or be the winner. But then later on, they would be switching. They would switch to a more open plan classroom. Instead of having their own workstations, 5 to 6 students would be sharing one big table, and then they would work together to come up with this craft. And there would be a lot of arguments amongst themselves, because when they got the materials and when they got the instructions from the teachers, they try to interpret them, and then they would also have more discussion in order to do a better job. But then there is no perfect answer, and therefore in the process of learning, they can encourage one another, and there can also be more brainstorming, and then after exchange, they will be able to get better results. Well, collaboration would also be good for personal creativity development. So that has been a boost to many students. So I'd like to ask the teachers and CPs here. So you will have to scramble for the mic. So in terms of creativity education, what does this have to do? What kind of help does it do to this? Because we're talking about a school, a community, and also an ambience. So why collaboration is so important to education? Can you share that with us? So for those who have joined since the first year, I think they have more to say, right? Teacher Ng? Well, we believe that collaboration is most important, because we have learned how to listen and respond. Because as I said just now, initially our students were very self-centered, and they could see no further than themselves. But then collaboration's opposite is competition. They try to express themselves, and they try to show off. So initially, when they raise their hand to say something, they would be telling us substance or content that doesn't have a lot of meaning or a lot of substance. But then after a year's collaboration, well, they gradually came to grasp of the things, and they'll be prepared to listen to the content of others. And then when they have group discussions, they would be prepared to report what was to report to us as to what was discussed. And when we ask whether or not they have suggestions to the fellow students, then sometimes they would do it verbally, and sometimes they would write it down on memos, and then they would then hand it over to the other students.
And they get the feedback, and that help the students' improvement. They will be writing things like the feedback on the presentation. There are valuable feedbacks for the students, and between the peers, this kind of interaction will certainly help to bring out the best in them and to ignite their creativity and improve their confidence. So you're not helping with the development of these students, you're also fostering changes in the classroom setting because they're having a new kind of environment. All right, that's pretty important. Teacher Hong, I still remember the ribbon story. I know they're experiencing a lot of difficulties. There are so many stories, and it does present some danger. Not every school would like to do it. What kind of collaboration do they have, and how does it help the schools work? They do have a shared goal in the collaborative process. Like, for example, they don't mind going an extra mile, and they really want to make things more magnificent, more majestic, and this is so impressive because normally it would be the teachers who would be instructing the students to get it better, to fix certain things, but they are doing this on their own initiative. And we also have another project. They use the paper cups to make another contraption, and that made other students curious. They aroused their curiosity, and the students would be asking what they were doing, and the entire vibes of the school have really changed. And everybody becomes aware of this, right? They've become the publicity ambassador, right? So it does rub off onto other students. What about the teachers? What is happening? Teacher Lee? We are doing these scarecrow model, and in June we're going to have the musical to be held. The students are doing this to make preparation for the musical, and there are some volunteers that we need, and they are responsible for ushering people and so on. All these are intended to help them, and they will take the initiative to do it themselves. Because if they watch other people do it, they will not be able to get any benefits. So other than the volunteers, we also let the students do this. And we like to put up some decorations for the school. Right, the creativity has reached a new stage. Creativity is not so much about personal creativity. It's about contributing to the common good, and you are changing the situation for the better. Well, how soon is the musical be held? June, right? Do mark a diary, Lynn. Give us a shout when it happens. An exhibition, right? The school tends to use Taobao shopping. The primary 5 children are able to do this sewing. We will teach them how to machine sew, and we have to show them that things are not easy to come by. I mean, it's not so easy as just by hitting a button on the smartphone to use Taobao shopping, right? So they can do it in a cheaper way than Taobao shopping mall. So please refrain from using Taobao. But certainly there are some countries, some jurisdictions that need your help. It's only that you don't use it in school, but still you can buy the fabric. Well, I think you should do something to improve the local economy of Shan Shui Po. Right, we should do both. I watch Yoki and also their musical rehearsal, and there are so many plans that are provided by Yoki in black and white. And Yoki brought along some colorful or colored fabric, and the children, depending on the plots, pick and choose the fabric. Of course, on Taobao shopping platform, they can buy cheaper. And they had the rehearsal. The classroom is pretty big, and they had the rehearsal. They don't really want to disclose too much of the plot, and in a way that was some good publicity. They were having the headgear in different colors, different fabric for the rehearsal, and this is a very interesting discovery. Right, let me turn to Tin Ka Ping Primary School. There are so many Tin Ka Ping primary schools in Hong Kong. How does it make your school different from other Tin Ka Ping primary schools in Hong Kong? Well, it's hard for me to say how we are different. All I can say is by participating in this program, the students become more confident. Right? Confident Tin Ka Ping Primary School, that's a hallmark, isn't it? At least other Tin Ka Ping primary schools haven't taken part in JC, ABC, so that they're not AFTEC kids. Right? AFTEC kids can share, certainly. There was a little girl who was very reserved. She doesn't really come out of her cell. And we asked her to do something, but her parents would have to ring up. And we saw the changes after a couple of lessons. She was bold enough to come approaching me, and she said, I want to be part of it. How can I do it? So you can see she's come out of her shell, and she's become better. I think the collaboration does make a difference. And as I said, they had to engage in some discussion, everyone contributing their views. At the beginning, they would insist on their ideas being the best one. So if some ideas were banned, they would feel unhappy, they would cry, they burst out into tears. And the stronger ones, I would say that my one is the best, use mine. Or in the small group, the most popular one would get the say. But I mean, gradually we saw that the dynamics began to change because they were beginning to talk about their own merits and the shortcomings of other ideas. At Primary 5, we did have a bit of an exercise. We asked them to find out different perspectives from which to look at things, and they should not be just insisting on their own point of view. In the course of collaboration, they were more willing to express themselves and looking at things from a wider variety of angles. And like we said, they're prepared to listen, and they're more prepared to communicate. And through this interactive approach, their ideas are accepted by others. They may not have the best of ideas at the beginning, but they would improve and they would become more confident, and they can tell us what they try to accomplish, their task. Right? There are all these changes at the beginning. They were not the strongest one, but because of this program, they were able to express themselves better, and with this collaboration, they are able to work alongside one another, and the creativity will not be stuck with the stronger player. They begin to play along. They work together, and they complement one another, and the creativity becomes so much better. Right, there is an interesting finding. In June, they're going to have a game on the playground. It's like the traffic light game that they played, and that there is a modification, and it's like a car racing, and they would be able to get the tools to get to the destination faster. And in the process, when we received the instruction, they would try to emulate one another in putting together the tools, and nobody won and nobody lost. Yes, please carry on. And everyone was trying to think that they should make more unique tools. And they have this soft exercise. They're comparing their own tools, and they are making props that are better than one another. So, and they're injecting their own ideas into it. Nothing is better than the others because some props will slow down other people. Some props would make them go faster than other people. So that's where the creativity lies. Right, Tinkapping Primary School will become a new must-see area. It can replace the Disneyland pretty soon. Yes, I like to go and play there. They're having all these new games, and they have all these tools. I ring up, give you a buzz when I go there. Yes, old folk like me like to do this. Teacher So, you're the one who hasn't spoken. Right through the collaboration, the children underwent some transformation, and they became more gregarious. Creativity needs sparks. You cannot do it on your own. There are some activities where they make their masks, and other children would raise questions, not so much to challenge them about the design or the colors and so on. When the kids are presenting their own masks, they do have their own ideas. The other children would raise questions that would, in a way, help the presenter make or improve the mask in a way that would be more presentable. So we're not stuck at the individual level. It's really a collective teamwork, and this is a common good that they are more concerned about. They make all these different props, and they make all these different masks. We allow the children to use these paraphernalia to express their own personality and create a drama show. And they have some sparks that they can let their imagination run riot, and it's down to the creativity on the part of the students themselves. So there is ample room for the children to try their hands. Doesn't matter whether they fail, because there is always room for improvement. So through the collaboration, we see that the creativity changes the children. The creativity transforms the classroom. The creativity transforms the dynamics of the children. It also transforms the character of the school, and people get to feel that this is an interesting school. I mean, people get the impression that schools in Hong Kong are homogeneous, and that does make a big difference. All right, we keep talking about the students in the 21st century. We are 20th century people. You can't be reborn again, I'm sorry. The 21st century student, the creative classroom, what does it do to the entire society, or what does it mean to the entire society?
Well, I think empathy is very important because when they collaborate, I would have my own constraints and you have your own ideas. And therefore, you may not be able to empathize with me. You may not be able to understand my shortcomings, but then sometimes teachers would also be playing a vital role in pointing out the direction. Okay? Once the teachers show the insight, then probably the teacher might keep him during the recess to do some follow-up work, and then you might not have seen him over recess, and yet that guy might have thought that I have also got a difficult time, and therefore you would also have to evaluate or value the setting. So in the future, we will have to learn to be kind to others. Well, in creativity education, you would have to learn about collaboration, and then there'll be empathy. So you would be prepared to look at things from the perspectives of others. So you will have to imagine yourselves and put yourselves in the shoes of the others before you can empathize. And then you will be able to widen your horizon. Okay, other teachers, Madam or Teacher Lee. Well, when you talk about this topic, I can see that the ultimate objective is to teach students as to how they can educate themselves, and the purpose of this is to enable the students to educate themselves, because in the process, in the journey, they can see that teachers have been collaborating with one another. And for CPs, they're also working with other people. And then students would also find out how important it is to listen to others. Definitely, that would be a great help to their future life. Yes, we are not deliberately educating or telling them as to what they are supposed to do, but then in the process, definitely they be able to learn something from it. So students' behavior would also affect how schools are run. Definitely in the process of education, that would also change the idea of a school, because that has already changed in the process. So what's your take on the students after joining this program when compared to others who haven't joined this program? What's the difference? Obviously, the difference is significant. What I'd like to say is that for those of you who are here, you may not want to know the relationship between AFTEC and the academic scores or results, but then in terms of the language proficiency assessment, well, during the group discussion, they would be able to get a score, because you would have to listen to the conversation of others, and then you would also have to comment on that. Well, students would lose scores here because they fail to listen, because they might be very nervous when it comes to examination, so they would only think about what they are going to say as an answer. But then throughout the AFTEC program, we are towards the end. So when we do the oral test, they would be listening to others, and then they would be able to comment on it. So this is very remarkable, because we are not emphasizing how their score has changed, but then they have already moved forward. They are no longer confined to themselves or their wrong conscience or their wrong selves, because instead of just listening to the teachers, they would also try to set themselves in a setting whereby they would have to listen to others. And therefore, in the course of examination, if they are prepared to do the same, then in their daily life, then they would be better able to adopt that approach. In other words, in terms of communicating with others, that would definitely be beneficial. Okay, a bit of advertising right now. So students would no longer be that nervous. So they would be less nervous, because when you take exams, you'll be more nervous. So that would also help with your exam results. And secondly, in the process, students will start to listen. And all the teachers here would have this trouble, would have this problem. That is sometimes students might not be bringing with them their headsets. They might not be listening. So whatever you say, they would just ignore it. So all you get to do is to prepare the exam papers, and then that's all they'd be prepared to know. And very often in class, the students would not be listening. In fact, this new form of education would also complement and help with the conventional education because they would be less nervous and they would be more prepared to listen. Is that the case? Yes, I agree. Because they can also see how we collaborate with one another. Because teachers would have to collaborate with CPs, and then teachers and CPs would also have to collaborate with students. So it's very important because we will have to create that ambience. And then under that ambience, they would be able to relax themselves and speak their minds. And then they can also express their opinions more often. They would also be prepared to see how their fellow students might be doing. So this is an interaction that would improve the ambience, and the atmosphere would also improve, and that would also help improve their mental state. I think it's not just confined to the class because 10 years on, the situation in the society will be very different. And how are they going to cope with that change and how they are going to interact with other people in the community? I think we will have to nurture that ability from a very young age. And we can see that change has taken place. And we hope that that would also be applied in their other activities in their later life, because some parents might wonder, all right, in 10, 20 years' time, when their children start to work in a community, what is going to happen to them? So all we can do is to, well, tell them to work hard, and then they can study hard, and then they can get into university, and then you can get a good job. And then you can set up your own family, you can get married, you can have a wife, and then you can even emigrate. No, well, let's not talk about immigration. All right, the present GDP, we have chat GDP, and everybody would be able to cheat. So what we are teaching them is not pure knowledge. In fact, that knowledge is to build up the right mental state, so that there would be an all-round change in the students. And I'd like to say thank you to schools in Xiangshui and Tianshui, because the students are more from the grassroots, and Hong Kong, if it wants to become strong, other than doing well with the mainstream schools, I think other grassroots schools would also have to do well. Do you agree? Yes, the fact that we can have this sharing session today, I think a very important factor is that in 2020, at the beginning, we still didn't have the normal timetable. Very often, students can only come for half-day schools, and we would also avoid having crowds or group gatherings and so on. And now we are gradually reinstating that, and you can see that students, initially, if you recall it, well, since last school year, all right, instead of adopting the conventional approach in assessment that I have to get good exam results, and then you would tell them that they've been doing well with good exam results. And this year, we're adopting a different theme because the policy is that we have relaxed the restrictions, and now they are able to work together. And now we are able to give them a set of new standards. That is, even if you get different opinions from your fellow students, it doesn't mean that you're not doing well. In fact, you can also think about that as a possibility. In particular, after you have accepted a suggestion, sometimes your product will become better. So you can see that there is a blossoming of ideas. Instead of thinking that even if we were in a group, we would have to get the top place, we would have to be the winner. Well, just a couple of weeks ago when I went for an observation class, I could feel that change. I can sense that change. All right, they would have to win over themselves instead of winning over the others. And of course, I don't want to see another round of COVID, but then you can see that instead of being very self-centered and very defensive and protective of themselves, they are making progress, and they are prepared to accept other people's opinions. And there is another form of doing the judgment or evaluation. So their ability in accepting and taking negative comments would be greatly improved. Yes, just now we also touched on a very important issue. That is in the UK, well, they would have to rely on parents to effect that change. So in changing the parents, would that be our next step in terms of our development? Teacher Lee, changing the parents. Well, when it comes to parents, I think I have a very good example here. Well, some parents, when they chatted with us, they said that after participating in that program, well, there would be more common language between them and their children. Because for some of the children in this age, they would be less willing to talk to their parents. But then after they've joined this class, well, when they do handicrafts and so on, they would be more willing to talk to their parents, and then they would start to chat with their moms, because their moms would be able to tell them as to what they can do in class. And therefore, as far as the parents are concerned, they are becoming more supportive of what we are doing. I think that's a very good way of advertisement, because once you manage to get the support from the parents, then you would be able to get the support from the students, right? Okay, teacher. So what's your take on parents? Have any parents told you that they have found this to be very good? Well, I'd like to share this example with you, because in my class there was a kid who had emotional problems, and as a result, he missed class for a couple of times. And then I talked to the parents, and then I found out that when you talk to the kid said that, I'd like to join very much. I'd like to continue with this class. And his mother was very supportive, because after missing the class for 2 or 3 times, then his mom told him that you cannot continue with this class, because you will have to go to private tutorials in order to catch up. But then she found out that the kid was very happy with the class. And then after we discussed with the parents, the parent was very positive. And then the mother would permit the kid to continue to join the class, because the kid would go back home and tell his mom as to what happened in class. And then she found out that the kid was very happy. In fact, my own son might be very remote, but then our school backgrounds are not very good, and therefore they lack self-confidence. But then this year we started to find out that after undergoing this training, they would have self-confidence, and they would be more prepared to come forward to report what they have done. So they would have confidence in both themselves and the work. And therefore you can see a different kid altogether. So they would no longer hide themselves in the hole. They would be more prepared to come forward. So instead of laying back in a black hole, they'd be coming out in the sun. Okay, JCACB would arrange for 2 cultural days for our kids, because we would take them to different exhibitions, and then we'd explain to them. We've been to Taikun. We have been to Kusama's exhibition. So other than widening their horizon, that would also help to broaden the horizon of parents, because when the kids went back, they tell the parents as to what they had seen. And then they would also be recording that in their journals, because that's the learning logs. So that parents would no longer have to take them to Disneyland. So instead, they would be more prepared to take part in cultural events and activities, or going to exhibitions. So instead of just taking a picture of a building, they would be going into the exhibition of Kusama, and then they'd be able to see more. Yes, teacher? Yes, in our school, there are 2 situations. In fact, parents have been very supportive. One is we would select students to take part in our activity, and then parents would be very doubtful. So what is it all about? Would it affect their normal classes? And then would that involve them so that they would have to take part in after-school activities? But then subsequently, they changed their mind. Well, sometimes we even arrange for workshops for the parents, so that they would know more about the activity. And then after their kids have taken part in these activities, they would also go back and report to their parents as to what happened in the workshops. And then gradually, parents got to know what their kids were involved in, and they would become very supportive. That's the first situation. Secondly, there would be kids who would very much like to join this class, but then parents turn us down, and then they would pick another activity instead of ours. But then amongst the students, they would talk to one another, and then one would say that after joining this activity, well, this is what I had done, and then it's fun. And then subsequently, their communication would lead to this change. That is for those who did not manage to join, and then they would go back to tell their parents, well, I'd like to join, so can I join next year?
So the parents are very supportive of our activities. If we can persuade the students, we can persuade the parents. And if there is a buy-in from parents, there will be more support. The policy would be relaxed, and we're going to do better. And there are the number of schools will be double, triple, and multiply. 5 minutes, I know, right? Teacher Ng. We're here for the first year, and the teachers are pretty traditional in their thinking. When we first had the AFTEC project, the teachers would say that play, what have you learned? Well, the kids would say that I had a good time playing. The parents were a little bit concerned, why spend so much time playing? Why didn't they teach more? And we have a dozen or so cross-boundary students, and they were looking at the Zoom, and they couldn't take part, and the parents were really concerned. But as time went by, the COVID has eased, and we went over to Wan Chai. The North District students, it is a massive undertaking to go to Wan Chai. It is like an expedition. We had some volunteers. Now we roped in the parents, and then they realized that it's not just about playing. We had these cultural activities in Wan Chai. We didn't allow them to use their mobile phones. We didn't allow them to use the iPad. They had to use the film camera to take photos. So they had new experience instead of just playing. The parents began to buy in. We also had talks and workshops for the parents, and there were AFTEC people coming to do the explanation, and they began to embrace this creative classroom. So the parents have to feel, think, and wonder, and there comes the changes, right, Madam Chen, CP. Parents, no, your view, your perception. I only meet the parents at outings. I don't see them much otherwise. I find that the children are influenced by the parents a lot because this is a traditional setting. They attach a lot of importance to their grades, and they would feel bad if they get bad grades. But this program has broken down the traditional mindset, and people are not defined by their grades, and their offers can be appreciated, can be accepted, and that alone would make them more open-minded. So I would be more confident, I can be more motivated, right? That would change the entire structure of education. We don't just look at the talented kids, and the talented kids should take part in the Olympics. We are doing this in a school, but like Steve said, this is the asset to the culture. We are doing some outreach activities. Like you said, the North District, in Shui Wai, the students may not get to see the musicals and the shows, and maybe a handful, a tiny handful of them have been to to the musicals. And I hope that there would be more students who would be able to get some more exposure to art. Art at the museum, performing art, is also one of the most exciting areas. So we're going to be taking them to the Hong Kong Ballet Show. I look forward to this. I'm anxious for this to happen. And the teachers should understand what we're doing, and they should also be aware that the students will be a part of the audience in the future. We have APA head here with us. I think we should pay a visit to the Hong Kong APA, the Academy for Performing Arts. Right? Please give your help. I'm lucky enough to have seen a number of schools myself. What strikes me is inequality. In traditional classrooms, we may have some high-functioning students who are excelling in their academic achievement. It would be hard for them to be humble. I'm not suggesting for one moment that they are arrogant people, but humble is what their mom told them to be. That for the Chinese, for the students learning Chinese, they may not have as good an imagination as other students, not as fertile, but this program will bridge the gap between the students of different abilities. And the children spend quite a bit of their time in school. If they can have harmony, if they can be more motivated, if they can learn from one another more, that would be the contribution of a creative classroom. All right, let's give a big hand to thank the 5 schools and all the teachers for the efforts that they've put in. But like we said yesterday, the key thing is whether we can expand the program and make it sustainable. I think we need to have the support of everyone in every quarter. For this to happen, Lynn cannot do this single-handedly. She may not be able to deal with this on her own. I hope that there will be changes going forward. This building used to be a prison in the 19th century. We're sitting on top of a prison cell, and underneath there is also the laundry room. Every single day they wash themselves, they change the clothing, and I hope that this laundry room building will enable us to do the laundry. We have to wash off all the old concept and build up a new dynamics for Hong Kong schools. So the 5 schools that we are transforming the schools. Schools will no longer be boring. Artists are not boring. Schools will no longer be about a brutal competition. The children find it most enjoyable to kick out all the other students and become on top. Now, it's not about education. Education is about working together for the common good. Another round of applause to thank the 5 schools, and also a round of applause for the hardworking team, and also our boss, Lynn, and also Dr. Wee, our respectable Dr. Wee. Without Dr. Wee, we would not have been able to come here today. Dr. Wee took my daughter to swimming, so a round of applause to this venue. Let's meet each other once again next year. We expect a full house next year. Thank you very much. Please be seated.